John Schneider meets with reporters yesterday as the general manager. He has been, but he's never really been in charge. It was always Pete Carroll running the show and John Schneider helping Pete Carroll set the table. That's what makes this kind of awkward, kind of unusual. And it wasn't like Schneider launched some palace coup. Others in the organization, as Pete Carroll said on Friday, appearing on Seattle Sports Radio, non-football people making the decision to move on from Pete Carroll. They move on from the coach. They hand the baton to John Schneider, who will be in charge of finding the next head coach, and off he goes. I didn't think they'd be able to pull it off, and I wondered last week a little bit whether Pete Carroll felt like maybe, Schneider had something to do with it, but I think at the end of the day, this was just a situation where they made the decision. It's almost like when a team fires the coach and elevates the coordinator. Like, what's the coordinator going to say? No, I don't want the job. They decided that Pete Carroll had to go, but they wanted to keep John Schneider. And Schneider has two choices: say thank you very much or storm out the door in protest into the unemployment line. So he made the fiscally prudent move, and also to the extent that you want to have a place to go to work every day, not that he wouldn't have found other work, but what are you going to say? What are you going to say? They made the decision to move on from Pete Carroll. He makes the decision to step into the captain's chair of the entire operation.
Yeah, it reminds me of that gif you love from The Office where, Steve Carell is pushing John Ingle, the actor, out of the door. And it's kind of like, okay, bye-bye, old man. Like, we got this from here. But, it's not like, John Schneider is really closing the door in Pete Carroll's face. It's that, Jody Allen is basically the one that is doing that and being like, no, John Schneider, it's your time now. So that's really interesting to me, that this is the way that they want their program to run. They want the program to essentially remain kind of the same, but you need to be elevated in terms of different things. And Pete Carroll, yeah, he's 72 years old, man. It's not like he is somebody that's young and all of these different things. So they want to get somebody in there who's going to be able to elevate the football program. And I understand that from an ownership standpoint, but I also think that it's really interesting when you see John Schneider talking about his relationship there with Pete Carroll and just how meaningful it is to him. Maybe there is some performance element to that, being at the podium and all that, but I kind of didn't get that feeling, at least watching that clip. And I'd read some things about it and I hadn't seen it until just now, but it's like, that seems like genuine emotion to me. And, I think that it says something about that building and the way that things have operated, and that those guys really were truly in lockstep when it comes to trying to build that team. And so now Schneider is going to have to set his vision and his vision alone for what that program is going to be going forward. And I'm really interested to see who they hire as head coach.
Well, here's Schneider talking yesterday about his new role and what excites him about his first ever head coaching search.
Basically, the role changes. Our setup earlier was, and it's been a question for a number of years, the coaching staff did not fall under my umbrella, and now it will. And it's not necessarily a Jody Allen decision or choosing this person or that person. It's just a contractual situation. 14 years is a long time for one coach to be in a spot, right? And it's been incredible. God rest his soul, Marty Schottenheimer would always tell me, one coach can't stay in one spot for more than 10 years. He retired when I was with him in Kansas City for a year. And it's just that opportunity to learn from all these people that are doing incredible things, in college football and around the National Football League. And you cannot, if you're stagnant in this league, you're behind.
Here's the reality. Every scout of players is also scouting coaches, because every scout aspires to be a general manager. And when that person finally becomes a general manager, they want to be ready with the coach they're going to hire. Sometimes it's just a close friend. Sometimes it's just somebody you don't even know that they want. They've got their list that they keep mostly to themselves of the coaches they would want once they finally achieve their their dream of becoming fully and completely in charge of a football operation. And this situation is weird because John Schneider is so established, but he's never been in charge. He's never had to hire a coach. He's got 20-plus years of knowledge and experience of all the coaches out there, everything he's ever heard, everything he's ever seen, everything he's ever studied, everything he's ever concluded. He knows who he wants. Now, when we played the matchmaker game over the weekend, based upon things I've been hearing about which coach ends up where each coach is currently tied, it was Dan Quinn to Seattle. I don't know that you can sell that after Sunday. To the extent you got non-football people in the building who are asking questions and putting their finger on the scale, I don't know how you sell that to them, because at some point you got to sell that to your fans. How do you sell? I mean, when the first question at the suit and tie press conference, and we know they're coming. Suit and tie press conference season is coming, yeah. NFL fans. When Dan Quinn's sitting there with his suit and tie on, and the first question, it probably won't be this, but one of them is going to be, how the hell did you give up 48 points to the Green Bay Packers, and how will you keep that from happening here? That's not the way to really, make a strong immediate bond with your paying customers. So I think Dan Quinn becomes a tougher sell for John Schneider, even if Dan Quinn's the name that's at the top of the list. And I saw some movement in the betting markets. I get all the offshore platform odds, like we're going to mention them, like we're going to give any credence whatsoever to the offshore. Like, come on, we're not going to mention the off ever. But I have seen some movement where Mike Vrabel is becoming, in play in Seattle, which would make sense if it happens.
Yeah, it would make sense. I mean, it seems like it would be kind of an extension of the defensive-minded guy, right, who comes in. We know that Mike Vrabel can build a team. We know that Mike Vrabel has been successful. We know that Mike Vrabel has elevated talent to great levels, right? I mean, he went to the AFC Championship game with Ryan Tannehill as his starting quarterback, for crying out loud, and with all due respect to Ryan Tannehill. So, like, that's something where I could see that happening. I guess the way that you would sell Dan Quinn is effectively with nostalgia, because he was on that coaching staff, right, when they won the Super Bowl, then when they went to the next Super Bowl and somehow lost because they didn't want to hand the ball off to Marshawn Lynch there. So, like, there are ways where I think you could sell that. And Dan Quinn obviously has done some really good things with that defense that was there in Dallas. The weekend's performance over against Green Bay, not a good representation of that. But I think that if you are convinced that Dan Quinn is the guy and he's the guy for you, then it's your job, if you're John Schneider, to sell that no matter what. Like, that one game should not take you off of that track if that's where your mind was going into this offseason.
Yes, but it's still a tougher sell to the people that John Schneider ultimately has to sell this to. It becomes a tougher sell after Sunday. All in high stakes. Everyone knows the pressure. Everyone knows the situation. And to give up that many points, not a good look for anyone that would be thinking about hiring Dan Quinn at this point. All right, John Schneider also addressed yesterday the makeup of the team right now, because it's kind of in flux and the quarterback situation hovers. They could get out of the Geno Smith contract by the middle of March if they want to. Here's Schneider talking about the current status of the roster.
I think it's a young, talented team that is, feels like they're right on the cusp. I think there's a lot of guys that have a ton of confidence in their abilities. They're all very highly disappointed in what just happened. I think to a man, they would all tell you that, and I know this from the exit interviews that I had, that we still should be playing, and everybody was very disappointed. But I think it's a great core. I think again, I think we're a very attractive job because of that. I think there's young talent all over the place.
And there really is, without question. But the first question when you're looking at any roster is, who's the quarterback? And they've got some flexibility. They could walk away from Geno Smith. They could walk away from Drew Lock. Drew Lock, I think, did a one-year deal. They could try to sign Kirk Cousins. They could try to trade for Justin Fields. There's a lot of options. It comes down to who the coach is and what the vision is, but John Schneider is going to be involved in that as well. It's not like the coach is going to come in and take over. Schneider's going to have some ideas, and he's going to feel invested to a certain extent in Geno Smith because they're the team that turned Geno Smith into a successful starting quarterback. And they have a favorable contract. They have flexibility. Why would Schneider want to tear it up and move on? It's not like Smith was bad last year. The only difference was he didn't make the playoffs. So I think that it's to be determined, but I could see Schneider not wanting to take advantage of the opportunity to rip that contract up and wanting to let it ride for another year and giving the new coach and hiring the coach with the mindset of getting the most out of the current quarterback and just seeing what happens going forward. Defensively, I think they can get to where they want to be. That needs more work. But yeah, there's a nucleus there of good players that aren't, approaching 30 that you can work with several years into the future.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, defensively, their secondary is young, it's talented. They've got good young corners. So that's something that you can work with. Their run defense has got to get better. That's something that they wanted to do this year, and then it just did not get to that level that they needed it to be. And then offensively, I mean, you still got DK Metcalf, great young receiver. I mean, youngish receiver is entering into his prime, I guess I should say. Smith and Jigba, we saw that he can make dynamic plays. Tyler Lockett's still there, veteran guy, yes, but he can still get it done for you. So there are pieces on offense and on defense where you can say this team can be competitive immediately. It's just going to be about getting the right coach in there. And if it is a defensive minded guy per se, then making sure you have the right offensive coordinator that can get the most out of the unit. And, if that happens to still be Shane Waldron, it would not totally shock me just based on the way that they've been able to get the most out of Geno Smith over the last couple of years, right? I mean, you won a game against the Eagles, and we know the Eagles were doing things that the Eagles were doing, but still, you won that game with Drew Lock. So I think that if you bring in a defensive-minded head coach, it's not out of the realm of possibility that Shane Waldron, their current offensive coordinator, could stay and then try to continue to get the most out of that unit.
If I could pick one name to be head coach of the Seahawks, it would be Jim Harbaugh. Not that there's any indication that there's interest, although a day ago there was no indication there was any interest in Atlanta. I just like the idea of Harbaugh going back to the NFC West, taking over a team that was, it was the nemesis, what's your deal, all that stuff, and sticking it to the 49ers or trying to a couple of times per season. All right, let's take a break. Season ended over the weekend for 6 playoff teams. We will do a post-mortem of sorts for the teams that suddenly found their seasons over the past few days when PFT Live continues right after this. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.